Hey everyone, before I get started, I just want to remind you that if you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and then join the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community by clicking the link in the caption. Hey, good afternoon everybody. It's Friday, it's the 6th of June. Welcome to our show, and I just want to say have a great weekend. It looks beautiful where I am, and all of you that are having some significant weather in the east, be safe, okay? The other day there was some meetings that were held at the IBBC. They held a successful spring conference at the Mansion House, okay? And why is this kind of important? Because it's reflecting Iraq's growing political and economic stability. And I think we've all been watching Iraq's economic and political stability. I think there's obviously going to be some back and forth when it comes to the politics side, but the security and stability in the country is dynamic, and that's really the most important to me. This gentleman, his name is Sawad. He's outlined that there's been significant progress. He notes that contracts with BP, British Petroleum, for integrated production in Kirkuk. He talks about total energy, water systems out of where? Basra. He talks about carbon reduction company is also established to monitoring emissions. That's what they're doing. And there's also a focus on replacing sweet water and desalinated water in Basra to boost local production to reduce imports. I think, what are they talking about? I'm pretty sure they're talking about gas. And they also mention a reduction of armed non-state actors, and they talk about a stable exchange rate. And some of the things that we're going to talk about have to deal with having a stable exchange rate. And that's going to be an interesting portion of this tonight. It goes on and says that they've been doing things that are beyond energy. They're talking about launching carbon bonds. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't done a study on carbon bonds just yet, but maybe you guys can do that too. But he says attracting foreign direct investment with sovereign guarantees. Foreign FDI, foreign direct investments. Basically, why are they doing these foreign direct investment attraction items? It's because they're making it lucrative. They're making sovereign guarantees. So that's totally a benefit for investors to know that they're going to have a safe investment. It says Iraq's economy is healthy with a GDP ratio of about 10%. And it says that they have improved laws for investors. They've been able to open up new contracts. They've got a new 1.1 billion sewage deal with the United Kingdom. It talks about the diaspora in the UK is encouraged to invest in Iraq. So those people that are outside of Iraq that were used to be in Iraq, they're looking for them to come back, bring their money back. And what does this whole thing mean? To me, it says attracting foreign direct investment with sovereign guarantees means that the Iraqi government offers assurances to foreign investors regarding the safety and security of their investments. That's what I said from the beginning. And I guess some of the key points that come from this conference is that these guarantees, they are commitments made by the government to protect investors against certain risks, such as political instability, expropriations, or currency inconvertibility. Now, isn't that interesting? Inconvertibility. So in other words, Iraq's currency at the moment isn't quite convertible just yet. Isn't that interesting? Is it expected to be convertible on the Forex? I think it is. What's the purpose of this conference? It says the aim is to create a more favorable investment climate, encouraging foreign companies to invest in Iraq by reducing perceived risks. So they want to address all the risks that have been associated, and they're also talking about what is the impact of foreign direct investment. It says by providing these guarantees, Iraq seeks to enhance its attractiveness as an investment destination, potentially leading to additional capital inflow, job creation, and economic development. It goes on and says, what's the context? It says, working to improve its investment framework to attract this FDI, particularly in sectors like oil, infrastructure, and renewable energy. And I like this part. At the end of the day, it says this strategy reflects a broader trend among countries looking to stimulate economic growth through foreign investment. So we had the Arab Summit, we had all that, and who is that? Those are foreign investors just as much as anywhere else in the world. I think that's pretty interesting information that came out of them, out of their conference just the other day. And obviously you guys know that the United Kingdom, the United States, and many countries have relationships with Iraq. And interestingly enough, this particular article has a lot of countries that have a relationship with Iraq, but they also have a relationship with global trade. And here's what I put into Patreon, patreon.com with Militia Man and Crew, and portion of this is in our Discord chat room. And I talked about it, so I get into the specifics. I've had a little bit of heat sometimes that I just read the news. I do. No denying it, but I don't give my analysis on it. I think that's utter nonsense. But to those that think that, hey, come into Patreon and see what really happens. But anyway, the Treasury releases a report on macroeconomic and foreign exchange policies of major trading partners of the United States. This was put out yesterday by the United States Treasury. And interestingly enough, if you guys sign up for the United States Treasury, you're going to get the same data that I get. Because they're kind enough to send you an email and give you an update. And so thankfully, I found it interesting in the afternoon, we have this article talking about macroeconomic and foreign exchange policies of major trading partners of the United States. You guys come into Patreon, you can read this whole document, or you can go to the United States Treasury's website and find it yourself. But it says basically the USA is committed to pursuing economic and trade policies that will spur an American revitalization marked by strong economic growth and the implementation of destructive trade deficits and countering unfair trade practices. And this includes combating unfair currency practices. What is that? Currency practices. Well, basically what they're saying here is that certain currency, you guys bear with me on this one. Currency practices is a tongue twister. But it says that they're to facilitate competitive advantage, such as unwarranted intervention in currency markets. So these countries that I'm going to be speaking of have unwarranted intervention in currency markets. And to be fair, this was not anything new. Back in 2020, they put international laws out. I think it was the Financial International Monetary Authority, and I think it was the Currency Manipulation Law. That was in, I think it was in April of 2020, okay? And one of those countries you're going to hear about tonight was a target, and I think at that specific time, it was specifically towards Vietnam. But they weren't the only one. So the United States administration has put our trading partners on notice as of yesterday that macroeconomic policies that incentivize an unbalanced trading partnership or relationship with the United States will no longer be accepted. And we will continue to strengthen our analysis of currency practices and increase the consequences of any manipulation designation. It says going on, the Treasury will use all available tools at its disposal to implement strong countermeasures against unfair currency practices. And they're going to name a few countries. Okay, so the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, he says, in line with President of the United States of America, first trade policy, the United States Treasury will be vigilant in identifying and taking action against currency manipulation and will continue to closely monitor a range of relevant microeconomic and financial policies implemented by our trading partners that propagate imbalances, so they're going to attack that. He says they also will contribute to significant exchange rate misalignments, so they're going to get rid of that. That's what they're hoping for. Or basically, as a result of unfair competitive advantage in trade, they're going to work on that. So here are a few of the countries that they're monitoring. They have a monitoring list, and they are major trading partners with currency practices and macroeconomic policies that have their attention. One of them is China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, Germany, Ireland, and Switzerland. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 countries that have been on or been forewarned that they're going to be monitored for currency manipulation. Interestingly enough, many of these countries listed in this piece yesterday are trading partners with the USA, and believe it or not, they're trading partners with Iraq. So when Iraq adjusts its real effective exchange rate, in my view, it will have an impact on trading partners that do business with Iraq. Currency manipulation is going to be monitored closely from here on out. This whole little bit of snippet that I'm going to talk about below is basically interesting, that the timing of this U.S. Treasury information to me is like no coincidence. Basically, it says several of this particular snippet I have, it says that several of the countries listed, which is all of the above I just mentioned, those 9, have trade dealings with Iraq, primarily driven by Iraq's significant oil exports and its need for imported goods and services. So basically, they break it down, and it says China, here's number 1, China is one of the largest trading partners with significant imports of Iraq's crude oil. In 2023, China was the 3rd largest oil supplier, and it goes on and talks about that. Okay, talks about power plants, talks about roads, talks about oil fields, talks about frameworks with the Belt Road Initiative, as they call it. Okay, they talk about Japan. Japan relies on Iraq's oil for imports, being a key supplier in the Middle East. It says in 2024, Japan imported significant volumes of crude oil from Iraq alongside other Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Didn't we just have a meetings conference with the region, the Arab League? I think we do, and I think that's what they're getting at. Okay, and so these Japanese companies are dealing with infrastructure. They're talking about trade, and they're just happen to be a little bit smaller than China, for instance. South Korea's involved, Taiwan's involved, Singapore's involved. They go in to talk about Vietnam. They talk about even some interesting relationships with China and Vietnam. With the President Xi Jinping in Vietnam in 2025 suggested efforts to strengthen regional trade networks and directly benefit Vietnam and Iraq trade through Asian ASEAN frameworks. And then they talk about Germany. So we're talking about Europe. Germany has a robust trade relationship with Iraq, focusing on what? Oil imports. And exports of industrial machineries and vehicles and pharmaceuticals. Ireland's trade with Iraq is relatively limited, but growing particularly in pharmaceuticals and high-tech exports. Switzerland re-entered the U.S. Treasury's currency monitoring list. Why? It says due to a surge in its trade surplus, particularly in gold and pharmaceuticals, some of which involve Iraq. Okay. Switzerland imports oil from Iraq and exports precision machinery, pharmaceuticals, and financial services. So here's a couple of observations. Look, oil is the driver. Iraq's economy heavily relies on oil exports, but this study doesn't necessarily talk about the non-oil revenue streams that they're talking about. But that's another question we can ask in the future, I think. Reconstruction and infrastructure. Countries like China, South Korea, and Germany are deeply involved in Iraq's conflict reconstruction, post-conflict, I should have said, securing contracts for energy, infrastructure, and urban development projects. We've been seeing all of this taking place for the last couple of years. And so they talk about trade imbalances. It says many of these countries run trade surpluses with Iraq, exporting high-valued manufactured goods, electronics, and machinery while importing just primarily oil. So basically, this is evident from data from 2025, where nations like Germany and Switzerland show significant trade surpluses with partners like the USA, reflecting similar patterns. This is coming from the United States Treasury. Regional dynamics, Asian nations. Wow, the snippet is giving a reflection of that. So all of these countries, all 9 of those, are increasingly integrated into Iraq's trade network due to energy demands, maritime trade routes. Okay, European nations focus on the high-tech industrial exports, leveraging Iraq's needs for construction. So as they're going forward, what are they talking about? Currency manipulation, that's the focus. And so we're going to say at the end of the day, some of the things that I've also found about currency manipulation and some of the supporting data that I put in and I talked about last night in my Discord chat room is that Iraq is under sanctions and is not actively traded globally at any significant means. But when they do have a real effective exchange rate, there's going to be an impact to all those trading partners I just had, because those trading partners were warned for currency manipulation by the United States Treasury yesterday. And so why did they do that? Is because, you know what, they have a significant relationship to Iraq. The thing about the significant relationship to Iraq is that Iraq is not an internationally traded currency just yet to any significant amount. So, but when they are and they have a real effective exchange rate, the impact of that exchange rate is going to impact those trading partners, just as they will the regional trading partners, just like the Arab League. If you have to think about that, that's a powerful situation. So when I talked about interconnectivity, and I talked about those types of things, that is a global situation. So when it comes to trade, when it comes to currency, if it comes to the Forex, when Iraq hits the Forex, they're going to be monitoring all those countries to play by the rules with a level playing field. I'm not saying this is every single one of these countries is going to be like Iraq. That's probably not going to be the case, highly likely not to be the case. But the bottom line is that they're going to have to play fair with real fundamentals, like I've always said. Iraq is going to have a component of oil, but they're also going to have that component in their fundamentals that include non-oil revenue streams that they've been building for the last 2.5 years. Okay, so I went ahead and found some information that talks about those. In my research, I referred to all of those 9 countries, and some of the data that I'm finding by asking questions and looking for data with Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan, Germany, Ireland, etc. Okay, Iraq's compliance with the International Monetary Fund, Article 8, is a management of real effective exchange rate, or REER, could influence trade dynamics and currency manipulation concerns involving countries like the 4 I mentioned. Okay, it basically says, what is some of the background? Well, the IMF Article 8 compliance, for instance. Article 8 of the IMF's Articles of Agreement obligates member countries to avoid imposing restrictions on payments and transfers for current international transactions and to refrain from discriminatory currency practices or even multi-currency arrangements with the IMF approval, without the IMF approval, and which is like the parallel market, okay? And they've been reducing that, haven't they? The mechanisms that they've been using for quite some time have been bringing parity to the parallel market. You're going to find that that's really kind of important and a big deal, but it's not totally significant because that market is not that big. But the point is that it is a multi-currency practice, and to be able to do that, they don't want to allow other countries like China or Vietnam or anybody to take advantage of those multi-currency practices. In other words, circumvent sanctions that are not going to allow that, and they're going to be monitoring for it. So basically, compliance signals Iraq commitment to compliance. So if Iraq complies, signals Iraq's commitment to open and transparent foreign exchange practices, which promotes confidence in currency, which is what? The Iraqi dinar. And what else? Her trade policies. So the real effective exchange rate. Well, the REER measures a currency's value against a basket of trading partners. Don't you find that interesting? It says basket of trading partners. And who was over in Iraq having a big, huge conference? The Arab League. Doesn't that include the Arab Monetary Fund? I think it does. What about the Arab Accounting Dinar? I think it does. And what is the Arab Accounting Dinar related to? The special drawing rights of the International Monetary Fund. That's where valuation comes in. Real fundamentals, real effective exchange rate. Okay, it says the basket of trading currencies, adjusting for inflation, of course, a stable or appropriately valued REER, real effective exchange rate, indicates that Iraq's currency reflects its economic fundamentals. I can't hammer that home enough. Okay, reducing the likelihood of competitive devaluation or manipulation to gain trade advantages. So they're not going to want anybody taking advantage of when Iraq has a real effective exchange rate. So, they want a stable currency. They're going to want stable currency for what? Pricing of goods and services coming across the border so that they can do the reconstruction and construction of the country. That's my opinion of that. Context of currency manipulation concerns. Currency manipulation involves a country deliberately intervening in foreign exchange markets to weaken its currency, thereby making exports cheaper and imports more expensive to gain a trade advantage. And this is what the U.S. says. The U.S. Treasury monitors countries for manipulation based on 3 criteria. 1, significant bilateral trade surplus with the U.S. 2, a material current account surplus. 3, persistent one-sided intervention in foreign exchange markets. Countries like all those I've mentioned have been on the U.S. Treasury's monitoring list at various points to meeting one or more of those criteria. Basically, they're talking about, and this is Iraq's economic and trade profile. It goes on and says that recent developments in February 2023, Iraq revalued its currency from 1450 to around 1300. We all knew about that. It says that persistent spread between the official and parallel exchange rates reflected illicit foreign exchange demand, including for trade with sanctioned countries. We've been telling you this for a couple of years. The parallel market is an illegal market. And now we're seeing that parity come down because why? Because the tools that they're using are working for a reason. And here we go. Those countries that are listed have been basically major buyers for Iraqi oil. And in return, they've just been swapping out goods and services and some investment. Potential impacts of Article 8 compliance and arrear. Well, if they have that, if Iraq does and accepts compliance and shows her real fundamental value to the world, and if they haven't already accepted it, because you're probably not hearing these warnings to those countries, those 9 countries yesterday out of interest, right? So it's enhanced trade stability. That's what it's going to do. Compliance with Article 8 ensures Iraq avoids restrictive exchange controls, facilitating smoother trade with listed countries. This reduces the risk of currency-related trade distortions, such as those caused by multiple exchange rates or restrictions. A stable real aligns Iraq's currency with its economic fundamentals and its exports, primarily oil, and imports prices competitively. And effectively, what it's going to do, if they have a real effective exchange rate, it could strengthen Iraq's ties with those countries like Japan and Germany, which rely on those stable oil outputs and supplies. Reduce currency manipulation, for instance. It says, by adhering to the IMF Article 8, commits to avoiding competitive devaluation, a key concern from the U.S. Treasury when monitoring countries like those afore. It says a properly managed rear suggests Iraq is not artificially manipulating its currency to gain export advantages, which could ease concerns about its trade practices with the U.S. and even others. However, the persistent spread between the official and parallel exchange rate could cause red flags and facilitates illicit trade or undermines transparency. Hence, what? What are they working on? Getting rid of it. Okay, so impact on trade. That says that China's demand for Iraq has grown. State-owned banks' lack of transparency has been noted by the United States Treasury, so China's been known for that. It says Iraq's compliance with Article 8 could reassure these partners of stable trade terms, but at any parallel market activity for sanctioned trade, so hence those countries that are sanctioned, like one of the neighbors, could complicate relations, especially if it involves China and Vietnam. I would think Iran's included in that. Talks about Germany, Ireland, and Switzerland and how they differ from that. But also it says the U.S. has strategic interest in Iraq's economic stability and monitors its trade partners for manipulation. Article 8 compliance could reduce U.S. concerns about Iraq's currency practices. You guys realize the United States has been working with Iraq for a long time about that. Okay. But any evidence of parallel market distortions can draw scrutiny, and so that's true, especially if they link to China with other monitored countries. And they go on, is there some risks? Of course there's going to be risks. Is there some big concerns? There probably are. Is certain things more of concern? Basically, the impact of IMF's Article 8 compliance and rear management on currency manipulation concerns involving those listed countries is not necessarily a major concern, but they're basically going to monitor it. So it ultimately says low risk of Iraq as a manipulator, and they talk about that. Parallel market risks, they talk about it, and they already know that it's under scrutiny. Limited direct impact on monitored countries. Basically, what they're saying here is that the trade volume with these listed countries, while significant for oil, is not large enough to fundamentally alter the currency manipulation profiles. But anyway, geopolitical sensitivities they talk about is the U.S. closely monitors Iraq to its strategic importance and its oil exports. Again, the United States Treasury, completely involved, United States. It says any perception that Iraq's currency practices enable illicit trade or align too closely with China could draw attention. It goes on and says Iraq's compliance with Article 8 and the management of a stable real effective exchange rate generally promotes trust in trade and currency practices, reducing concerns about manipulation in dealings with those countries. However, persistent parallel market spread and potential links to sanctioned trade could raise indirect concerns, fair enough, particularly if it's tied to countries like China or Vietnam, which are already monitored. While not major concern on its own, Iraq's currency practices could amplify existing tensions in global trade if mismanaged. I don't think they're going to be mismanaged, but the bottom line is they have been strengthening their monetary policy and framework, which is and has been recommended by the IMF to narrow the official parallel exchange rate gap and enhance transparency. And we have seen all of that take place of recent. So it's already been in the pipeline. I would say that, in my view, the warning that was out from the United States of America to those 9 countries Thursday, and we have a holiday on Fridays in Iraq, and they also have a holiday through Monday, is a very powerful time for those countries around the world to take notice that they're going to be monitored for something that is going to change. Because what I've been talking about is what the expectation is. Whether that happens or not, they have a real effective exchange rate in the very short term is to be determined. I don't have a date and a time for that. But I can honestly say is that why give a warning on a Thursday going into a long holiday weekend? It just makes you think that they're moving forward with what? To me, it's an imminent real effective exchange rate at some point in time. That's where I see. But let's see what happens. And then, hey, you guys, if you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe. And again, thank you very much for all you that have been in PayPal and Zelle and Venmo. You guys are awesome. Very much appreciated. Have a great weekend. Once again, guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you like this content. Subscribe to the channel or join us at the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community for even more exclusive content. You can also donate to this channel by hitting the links in the banner to help keep this page up and running. Your generous support is greatly appreciated, as always. Much, much appreciated. Thank you so much and have a great day.